Peace, YouTube. Peace. So, this is gonna be the first video of me doing a lecture that I'm going to drop on both Patreon and YouTube. This may be the only one that I'm going to drop on YouTube. So if you want to continue viewing my lectures, you will have to do it on Patreon and pay for this information. It's not like you can't find the information for yourself. It's not like you can't get it from somewhere else. But you won't get it like you're going to get it here. And I'm also going to simplify it for you so you can understand, so that when you go to these other sources, you go prepared and already have an idea of what you're going to, hear and understand, or see and understand. Right. With that being said, I know through a lot of my videos that have been dropping, well, the more recent videos that I've been dropping, I've been dripped out, a lot of jewelry and all that. Nice outfit, but I'm doing something light for this video. Just something quick, and it's only to get you guys interested in my lectures. However, nothing in this conversation is gonna be light. It's gonna be heavy, actually. If you're offended by anything in this video, I will not apologize. I will say this video is not intended to offend. It's intended to educate. If you're offended, please just leave peacefully. Do not comment dumb shit under my video. Do not dislike. Just get the fuck off my video. Don't watch anymore. Period. Now, with that being said, I want to speak about a few lies that we've been taught in school for the past few decades, maybe even centuries, probably decades. Yeah, more so decades, or half a century. That I feel like for us to progress, we have to address it. We have to learn the truth. We have to accept the truth. We have to push the truth. I'm mainly doing this for the progression of minorities, particularly those minorities whose forefathers / ancestors got to where they are due to the transatlantic slave trade, the slave trades that preceded the transatlantic slave trade, and those that came after, because there are a lot more slave trades than we're taught in school. You just gotta go self-educate, and do the proper research, and you'll see it was a lot of slave trades. I'm really doing this for those people who are suffering today due to the disadvantages given because of those slave trades. And also to educate and to discourage the people who have unearned privilege due to slavery. Not disrespect, not offend, but to discourage, and also urge them to stop teaching lies. Now, with that being said, one of those lies is that those brought over in slavery, let's start with the Americas. Those brought over into the Americas through slavery, particularly North America, particularly the United States, particularly the South, mainly the South, but in general, the United States. If you want to get it technical, the whole United States had slavery, and benefited off of slavery, and was really built off of slavery. One of the biggest lies that was taught to the descendants of slaves was that slaves came here illiterate. That's a lie. The slaves were not illiterate when landing on these shores. As a matter of fact, the easiest way that I know of to explain and prove that that's not the case is to say, if the people in power, the people who are responsible for teaching us history, they teach us using technicalities and not telling us the entire truth and not being specific with us. And they're successful doing that because they did not allow us to speak proper, to read for a long period of time, and for the most part didn't let us speak that much at all, unless it was yes sir, yes massa, yes boss, yes ma'am. You know, you get the picture. Yes, I'm drinking directly out of the jug. And I know it's not alkaline water. However, I need to hydrate. And drinking a lot of water is the best way to do that. And since I'm the only one drinking that water, I don't care. And there's no point pouring a glass because I'm going to drink the whole thing. So, like, probably during this video. So, don't judge. But back to the information. Not being allowed to read or write or talk set us back. Gave us decades of being behind in education. And not just education in general. See, we have to be specific. In the American education, the United States educational system, it set us back decades. However, doesn't mean we were uneducated. It means the descendants of the original people that were brought here after a certain amount of decades were uneducated. But not the original people that were brought here, not the first few decades of slaves that were brought here. And why I say that at some point we may have become uneducated is because over time, the level of education, if not preserved, and the information, if not preserved, it degrades, it decays, it breaks down, it dissipates over time, if not preserved, and if not preserved well enough. With that being said, those original peoples that came here, and they only tell us bits and pieces because, again, because of that degradation of education amongst the descendants of slaves, they realize the slave masters and the people in power, the people responsible for the educational system, once we were freed, and that goes for anywhere, but I'm specifically focusing on in America because the Puerto Ricans we know today are descendants of African slaves and Native American slaves. Dominicans we know today are descendants of African slaves, Native American slaves. The people in Brazil are descendants of African slaves, Native American slaves. The people of Mexico that we know today are descendants of slaves and descendants of Native American, descendants of Aztec, Mayan, and Native American slaves, and some of them even African slaves. I think I said African American slaves on the other, for the other peoples, but excuse that, African slaves. And I'm not saying Africa as a country, I'm saying continentally. I'm going to get on that too. That's a big lie we were taught, that Africa was a country, but I'm going to get into that. With that being said, I'm focusing on the Americas because it's the most famous, most pivotal place in slavery, at least in American history, because I'm in America right now. I'm in the USA. It is one of the main points of history that the United States focuses on when it comes to people of color, is slavery. It's like the fucking starting point for African American, black, people of color who were born here's history. It's like that focus point, the focal point, if you will. They realized through degrading our literacy skills, our education, so to speak, that at a certain point, they would no longer have to outright lie to us, right? They just have to tell us the truth. They can tell us the truth, but misrepresent what they're saying. So what I mean by that is, I'm gonna prove that the slaves were not illiterate, and answer that as well, and take care, and basically address both the two things that I mentioned. That all they had to do, I'm gonna prove 2 points in one shot. That all they had to do was tell us the truth, but misinterpret, or basically not tell us the full truth. And they no longer had to flat out lie to us anymore. And it's going to prove a lot of my points after this, a lot of my questions, and a lot of my hypotheses rather. It's going to prove a lot that I have to say just by once I prove this one point. And I'm proving that it was a lie that we're illiterate. So don't forget that. Once we got to a certain point of uneducated descendants of the original slaves that were brought here, they realized that we no longer have to lie to them. We no longer have to come up with complicated lies to keep them in control. We can just basically tell them the truth without directly telling them the truth. So what they did was, one of the examples of those lies is, or not fully telling the truth, so let's say little white lies is, the slaves were illiterate when they came here. And why, I'm going to first tell you why they did that, why they told us that. So that to absolve themselves of any responsibility of taking slaves and all of the horrific things that were done to the slaves. That's why they told us that bullshit. That the slaves were illiterate. That's a lie. Illiterate. That was a lie. They taught us that to make it seem like bringing us here was, yes, it was a curse, but it was also a blessing. That if we would have never came here, we would be in Africa wearing loincloths, living like savages, and being uncivilized. However, that's also a lie. That would not have occurred. They tell us that we should be grateful. They teach us basically that we should be grateful to be their slaves, which that fucks us up generations later, and is still fucking us up today. That whole thought process, that whole mindset that they set into us is still affecting us today. All minorities, really. So, and they still use this tactic. They make you grateful for the horrible things that they do to you without you even noticing. So, through treachery, through dishonesty, and and with ill intentions, and in multiple fields, Okay. My mouth is dry now. I don't know why I keep eating this and it's dry in my mouth though. Alright. I know you guys are getting bored because it's taking me forever to give you guys this information. Give me a second. I just want to set up the plot before I actually drop the bomb on you and prove my point. The lie of we were illiterate, that was taught to us to say, wait, but we gave you guys the gift of reading and writing and speaking. However, they did that so that when they can absolve themselves of the guilt for everything they did and the consequences for everything they did during the time of slavery, during them civilizing us. And they've used it, the colonizers, the ancestors of the colonizers have used that in multiple empires and multiple dynasties, kingdoms. Everywhere they went and destroyed, they used that same lie, that same tactic to keep control of the original people that were in that land. They say, hey, we give you civilization so technically we did you a favor, so you can't be mad at us. And they use that to avoid giving us reparations. They did that to avoid giving us reparations. Right? So there's so many reasons. But now once we understand that, we have to understand something that's such a simple idea. And I'm going to prove my points by saying this. An individual, and I'm not really targeting anyone. I'm just using them as an example because in America, these people come here very often. And they're a prime example of someone coming from, no disrespect, coming from a different land, or not really different landmass, but different country and coming here, a different nation and coming here, and not, quote unquote, being considered illiterate. If a person from Mexico, a Mexican, comes to the United States, are they illiterate? I'm going to pause and give you guys a second to think about it. If your answer was no, you are correct. They're not illiterate. They just don't know how to read English. They just don't know how to speak English. They just don't know how to write English. They're not illiterate. They're literate in their own dialect. The same way the slaves were not illiterate. They were not capable of reading, writing, and understanding the dialect of the land they were brought to. It does not mean they were illiterate. So the people who teach us, they try to mind fuck you, and they try to say, well, they were illiterate, but they don't tell you anything specific in any further details. They were illiterate when it came to our dialect, but they were not fully illiterate. So they trick you into believing that they civilized us through teaching and education and came in peace and this, that, and the third. Oh, they'll tell you part of the truth. Oh yeah, we did this, we raped you, we castrated you, we raped your women, enslaved you, did all type of shit, hung, lynched you, beat you, all this other shit, right? They'll tell you the truth about that shit, but then they'll make it not sound nice though, and make you say, okay, it's not so bad when it Because now look at we're in America and we're doing great in America. Which we're not. We're doing, well, yeah, you do all that fucked up shit to us, but, you know, it's not so bad being in America. Yet you have no true ownership of America at all. Yet you built America. And you were fooled into accepting it the way it is now because all they had to do is say the slaves were illiterate. The slaves were uneducated. No, you weren't. You were uneducated in the ways of these colonizers. You were uneducated when it came to the ways of the colonizers. You were uneducated in the ways of the colonizers, in the educational system of the colonizers. You couldn't read the dialect or write the dialect of the colonizers. In the motherland, the land you came from, you could have been a doctor. You could have been anything that is accredited with having a certain level of education, a higher standard of education. However, those facts are never mentioned when we're taught in school. And I think we need to change that. Because if this country is really concerned about decreasing the level of crime, the amount of crime in the United States, the amount of black on black, and I'm not even going to say black on Hispanic because let's be perfectly honest. Most Latinos descend from African slaves, therefore you're black, right? Most nondescript people of color, you're descendants of African slaves, you're black. Jamaicans, you're black. Haitians, you're black. African Americans, Afro Americans, colored folk, whatever, you're black. You're fucking African. Kemite scholars of Kemet, you're black. You're African American. You're African. Hebrew Israelites, you're African. Continentally, so I have to say that to all of you. Continentally, you're African. Those of you who say you're Moors or you're Muslims, you subscribe to Islam, you are African continentally. Okay? And we're going to talk about that continentally thing too. We're going to talk about that because there's a lot of people say, wait a minute, Israel, as far as the Hebrew Israelites, Israel's not on the continent of Africa. To the uneducated, it's not. However, I'm going to get into further detail, but I'm going to address that by saying Israel is on the continent of Africa. It was separated by the Suez Canal, a man-made canal. That's number one, to separate it from Africa. Number two, Israel sits on Africa's tectonic plate. Research it. That's enough to understand that Israel's in Africa, not Asia. Back to, and there's no such thing as the Middle East. That's a very new term in order to separate the Holy Land from Africa. And I'm not just talking about Israel, the entire Holy Land. That means Mecca and all of that, to separate it from Africa. They tried Egypt too. They tried to say Egypt was in the Middle East at one point, but that had to stop. They couldn't deny that anymore. We're gonna get into why we really shouldn't deny Israel anymore being part of Africa either in a later lecture. But let's get to my point for this lecture. We have to use common sense to simplify the information that we're trying to educate our people with. Yeah, we could get into the metaphysical this and this, that, and the third, and what we learned in the book, but the easiest way is to use common sense in what you can see. Just because someone may not be literate in your dialect does not mean they are illiterate. You're using technicalities to say that someone is uneducated and uncivilized. That's what they did. They used technicalities. Well, technically, since they're not literate in our dialect, they're illiterate. So now we can lie to them and say we educated them and we gave them this, so we don't have to feel guilty. We can absolve ourselves for any guilt for any wrongdoings that we did. That's how it happened. That's exactly how it happened. It's that simple. We don't gotta use no metaphysical with mumbo jumbo. We don't gotta go into semantics. We could just be straightforward with that. They used a technicality and abused it. But again, they were not illiterate. Now, let's get into the facts though. Yeah, let's get into the facts though. The fact is, they were illiterate. The colonizers, their ancestors. And the people who taught them were the people they later on enslaved. Because, and why I'm bringing that is because we have to stop allowing these descendants of the colonizers, the slave masters, the people who kidnapped us, from taking credit where it's not due and denying it where it is. And stop debating each other. But let's get back to the continental thing, because I'm really sick and tired, and why I'm even talking about this, I was going to save it for another lecture. I might in another lecture go deeper in detail. Why I said continentally when it came to saying people were African, certain ethnicities were actually African. Well, I said continentally because some of you might not believe, but Africa is not a country. Africa, I repeat, Africa is not a country. A lot of you are like, really? I didn't know that. Or some of you are like, fuck out of here. Some of you are like, what the fuck is he talking about? I know. Africa's not a country. Africa's a continent. Whoa. Conspiracy theories. No, it's the truth. Common sense. Look up continents. Africa shows up. And this is particularly the reason why Africans, quote unquote, of different nondescript, and there's too many to mention, nationalities, think black people in America are ignorant. And they laugh. They laugh because you're fucking stupid. No disrespect. I say it with love. Africa's a continent. Now, once we understand that, we can now understand that within Africa's borders, there are a multitude of countries and nations. And once we understand that, we have to come to understand and open our mind and stop using semantics and stop using it as a crutch to disrespect the Hebrew Israelites. When they say they're not African, they're technically not lying. I mean, geographically and continentally, they are, but not nationally. That's not their country of origin. Their country of origin technically would be considered Israel. Okay? Kemet. So, for example, those of you who are Kemetic scholars and Kemetic priests and whatever, no disrespect, you're not African nationally. That's not your nationality. That's your origin, your homeland, continentally. So stop with the debate of, oh, Hebrew brothers keep saying they're not African. Oh, fuck them. No, they're not wrong. We have to be very specific. Continentally, They're not. We are not. None of us are. Now, should we accept being African? Should I stop a Dominican, Puerto Rican, whoever, who else? Whoever came over in slavery to different lands, Jamaicans from saying they're African? Should it stop them? No. Because through our identities being stolen and replaced, that separate us from the ability to say, oh, I'm Nigerian, I'm whatever, right? Those of you who identify with Egypt or Kemet or Mizraim or whatever, I often hear you guys, you scholars, say we're African. That's cool, that's fine with me. However, I would like to hear you start saying we're Cometian or Kemites, or we're Egyptian, or we descend from Mizraim. I would like to hear that. Those of you brothers from Israel, I would like to hear you acknowledge the fact that you are African, because Israel is on the continent of Africa. They sit on the same tectonic plate. Okay? And they're separated by the Suez Canal, which is man-made. Which means it was originally part of the continent of Africa. And now sits in a made-up geographical locale, as in the Middle East. Okay? Now, those of you who subscribe to being Moors, please stop with the I'm not African shit too. Stop. Like as I just explained, continentally you are. Africans of different nationalities, please stop denying African Americans. Okay? And there's no such thing as an African American. You cannot hold two continental nationalities. You cannot hold two continental identities. It doesn't make sense. You can't be African Mexican. Although, I apologize. You cannot be an Asian African. You understand? Technically. Because Asia is a continent. Within Asia's borders, continentally, there are nations. Russia. Russia. Europe. China. And multiple others. We have to be more descriptive. Be more specific, because you're misleading people when you, to the Hebrew Israelite brothers, no disrespect. You are misleading the youth, and you're misleading the people you teach when you say you're not African. And I know you're not dumb enough. I know you're educated enough to understand that technically you are. Not technically, you are. And I think once you guys accept that, people will stop saying, stop fighting the idea that we do descend from Abraham and Shem and all of these biblical characters. They'll stop denying the fact that Yeshua or Yeshua or Yehoshua or Jesus, or quote unquote Jesus, the Messiah figure, whoever, was in fact black. They'll stop denying that. They'll stop denying the historical facts that these were real people, because you're now identifying with the continent you belong to. We understand that nationality-wise, this is what you are, but you need to be more specific. Okay? And you can't accept one fact without the other fact. You cannot. That's the truth. As far as these lies that are being taught to us, one of those lies is that we were taught was that Africa was a country. And we weren't taught that entirely in school, but it was more so just kind of brainwashed into us. It wasn't directly taught like, oh, that's what it is. We were kind of brainwashed through technicalities and trickery. It wasn't necessarily because we would be taught about individual countries, but instead of saying this Guyanese, this Nigerian man, or this man from Nubia or whatever the case may be did blase, 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 blah, or this specific empire did blase, blah, and that's why they're important. A lot of times it would be generalized as Africa is famous for da 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 da, and that happens through regular life stuff too. When people speak about Africa, a lot of times they don't get too descriptive or too specific, and that separates us further from grasping an identity within Africa. And we do these genealogical studies and these DNA studies. Again, Africa has this thing where it's also divided by tribe, not just country, not just nation, tribe, and also by family. And that further makes it more difficult to take an identity, because when you have these celebrities or people who go get a DNA test or ancestry test, and they say, oh, 80% of your people come from Nubia, and 2% from Ethiopia, and 1% from Kemet or Egypt or whatever. They say, oh, or even 100% from Ethiopia. Oh, I'm African, I'm Ethiopian. I'm African. No, just say I'm Ethiopian. Once we start doing that and then accepting the African part, to those of us who don't deny being African, those of us accepted being African, let's start out saying I'm Ethiopian, I'm Ethiopian, I'm Ethiopian, I'm whatever, and then say I'm African. Once we do that, we have to force the people in power to stop generalizing and regurgitating to those of us who are not in the knowledge, right? Which would allow us to educate better. A lot of the lies that were taught to us aren't necessarily are not necessarily forgotten about. They're remembered intentionally. They're made so that we remember it forever and we live by those lies. Those lies continue to affect us today. With that being said, all of the lies that have been taught to us can always be proven as just what they are, lies. And as I make these lectures, as I come to teach you, I promise to improve in my lessons, my lectures, increase my knowledge so that I can increase knowledge for you, and simplify it enough and take it slow enough with you so that you can absorb the information and not get offended or not lash out because you might not understand right away, in which a lot of us have to sit down and relax and listen. A lot of us not interested in knowing. A lot of people say, get out of here with that back to Africa bullshit. However, I feel it's very necessary that those of us who have common ancestry to slavery, doesn't matter what you identify as, what nationality you identify as, we have to understand we have a common ancestor, a common landmass that we originate from. And in order for us to sprout a true revolution and gain true freedom and true equality and get rid of injustice, we need to seriously sit and listen and accept knowledge when it's given from the right sources, from the sources that don't benefit on us being stupid. You understand? We have to learn to accept knowledge from the correct source, not the source that benefits in our destruction, but a source that benefits in our uplifting. That being said, I love all of you. Thank all of you for viewing my videos. I know I was supposed to have my intro and outro on these videos. I was just dropping this one to build interest. When I upload it to Patreon, it will have the intro and outro. It's still, even though you've probably already watched the whole thing, it's still worth go seeing it on Patreon, because trust me, these lectures are going to have some exclusive intros for them that are really going to be dope. I hope you guys continue to support. You will be able to Cash App me very soon. I'll drop a video where I'll drop my Cash App specifically connected to my my YouTube channels. You'll be able to Cash App me donations for content, and you know, send me whatever you want to, that and tell me in the you know, in the notes, Cash App me, hey, I want to see you make a video about this, or lecture us on this, and can you get information on this and present it to us, and I'll do it. Those of you who donate more, of course, I will go first. I will, you know, cater to first. Those of you who can't really afford to donate more, I still will get to you. However, those of you who provide more funds for that research, you know, I would basically have more funds to do that research and, you know, and make it happen. Those of you who subscribe to my Patreon, I will appreciate it. My Patreon is KahunaveliTV. Okay? Kahunaveli. Henceforth, it's spelled right on my name when you see my YouTube. TV. I'm not sure if I put the underscore, so type it first as Kahunaveli, no space, no underscore, TV. If you don't see it, then it's Kahunaveli underscore TV. If you don't see it, then it's Kahunaveli space TV. I can't remember, because I've been so busy prepping content to put here on YouTube, because I can't forget about you guys, and prepping content to put exclusively on Patreon. With that being said, thank you all, love you all. You know, subscribe, like, hit the Patreon, hit the Cash App when I release the Cash App information. Keep supporting, and keep being positive, and keep growing. Peace.